Do you think that the action New Zealand's government is currently taking on climate change is sufficient and does justice to our future generations? If not, what goals and actions would you push for in the next term if elected?
No, firstly, no, I don't think it's sufficient, and it does future generations a huge injustice. New Zealand is amongst the 5 worst countries in the OECD in terms of per capita greenhouse emissions, so we're really, really bad. So you could think of it, if you like, as intergenerational theft of our atmosphere. I think what we need to do, if I'm elected, or what the Green Party will push for, is we need to make sure that the government on New Zealand is ambitious and pushes for greenhouse gas emissions, a reduction, huge reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and strongly supports a binding agreement to limit limit warming from greenhouse gases to 2 degrees. And then we've got the targets within that sort of overall ambition of 90 degrees reduction by 2020 from 1990, 90% reduction from 1990 levels by 2050. And then an interim target of 30% by 2020, just to get us going, because the sooner we start making savings and bringing the emissions down, the greater that net effect will be.
Okay. In your opinion, is the ETS in its current form an equitable system that delivers sufficient economic signals to emitters? What changes would you advocate to make it more effective, if any?
Okay, so John Key's government introduced this watered down ETS, that reduces greenhouse gases by less than 1%. It won't make any difference to the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's not an equitable system. It's not equitable because it subsidises the big emitters. It passes the costs onto the New Zealand taxpayers in the form of the Kyoto repayments we're going to have to make. So New Zealanders actually lose twice because of this. Firstly, because they lose because of the extra taxes they're going to have to pay, and secondly, they lose because we're going to miss out on that green economic wave that we should be jumping on at the moment, where we're setting up our low carbon industries and supporting them in doing that. Because we can have a low carbon economy that works for all New Zealanders, for all generations to come, but for that we need to put an effective price on carbon, also greenhouse gas pollution now.
Okay. What are your opinions on the expansion of fossil fuel industries such as coal and lignite mining and oil and gas exploration in New Zealand? And do you personally support a call for the 10-year moratorium on new coal and lignite developments?
Yeah, well, the Green Party totally opposes the expansion of those fossil fuel industries, especially lignite and deep sea oil drilling. Lignite's an incredibly dirty and inefficient way to make diesel. So total moratorium on a moratorium on any further coal mining permits, and leaving all of our lignite, which is the dirtiest coal in the ground. For the deep sea oil drilling, we would institute a moratorium on that, and that would also include fracking, which is a really dangerous side effect of it. So why would we start to dig up our Don Elder wants to dig up the lignite in Southland, and he thinks he can do that by burying the CO2 down there as well to sort of offset the emissions. But somebody needs to remind him, we need to continue to remind him it's a seismic area. It's not a great idea to be burying CO2 in a seismic area, quite apart from all the other sort of negative aspects of lignite mining.
Okay, well, what do you see as the main future sources of energy for electricity, transport and heating for New Zealand? And do you support the call for the government to create an action plan to attain 100% renewable energy by 2050?
Yeah, well, definitely. There's going to need to be a combination of clean tech, alternative energies. So we're talking about solar, wind, biomass, but plus we need to make sure we're good on the conservation side of things as well. And this is where the Clean Smart program that New Zealand, the Greens introduced over the last electoral cycle and negotiated with the government is really important, because that insulation of homes is a really important way to reduce energy costs and improve the health of families. So that sort of thing is important. There's great opportunities here in Christchurch for things. We just had a paper come around about a district energy system where you can have efficiency gains by doing things, not just building by building, but across a whole area, for example. So looking into those alternative ways of providing power. Do we support the call to create an action plan of 100%? Well, I think I mentioned 90% by
Yeah.
2050. Well, look, we probably, if we went for 100%, we might strike the 90%. So,
Yeah.
so yes, we would support that.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Well, I mean, this leads to my next question. Do you think the government should be doing more to promote research, development and deployment of low carbon and more sustainable technologies and practices in New Zealand?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, this is all part of our green jobs priority for
Yeah.
this election. And we think through a mix of government procurement, tax incentives, startup funding, and $1 billion boost to R&D, we should be supporting those clean tech industries and, supporting our local grown success stories and our wind power companies and so on within New Zealand,
Yeah.
and having our state-owned enterprises invest in them, and then all the other stuff with the Heat Smart program I talked about as well.
Yeah. Okay, well, do you perceive New Zealand's dependence on oil as a risk to our economy in the age of high and increasing oil prices? And do you support the reallocation of spending on new roads towards low carbon and transport initiatives?
Yeah, the International Energy Agency said recently we passed the peak of oil production from conventional sources in 2006.
Yeah.
We're already on the downward slope.
Yeah.
So it's a massive risk to our economy that isn't going. We now more and more we're running, more and more and faster we're running out of oil. We've got reserves left of oil, but they're getting harder to extract. And if we don't start to use those reserves sensibly to create the green tech alternatives now, we're going to be pretty stuffed later on.
Yeah.
We need to start doing it now. And yes, definitely we need to move that funding away from roads towards the low carbon initiatives. Why are we spending $11 billion on roads of national significance?
Yeah.
They are taking us on a highway to nowhere.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to reinvest that money in public transport, active transport modes, cycling, encouraging carpooling. This all needs to happen at a government level. We need government leadership to do this, but also needs to happen at local level as well. And there's a great example here in Christchurch where a developer out in Hils is refusing to put in the cycle lanes of the required size.
Yeah.
So here we've got new developments going in, which is an ideal opportunity, especially post-earthquake,
Yeah.
to be developing, doing things properly, putting cycle lanes in and doing it sensibly and having a proper cycling infrastructure like they do in Europe.
Yeah.
But no, he wants to intensify the amount of housing and reduce the size of the cycle lanes to the point where it's actually going to be dangerous to cycle, more
Yeah.
dangerous than it currently is.
Yeah.
So local level, just as important.
Okay. Well, what actions would you take in your electorate to enable your community to increase their understanding of climate change and to reduce their emissions and dependence on oil?
Yeah, well, I'm a teacher. I'm a secondary school teacher, a science teacher. So one really good avenue for me to do that, in my profession, is to using the environmental education for sustainability and the EnviroSchools programs, which are really, really good programs.
Yeah.
So getting my kids engaged in these what are pretty hands-on kind of teaching programs, and then developing an awareness in them and some action competence so they can be aware of the issues and then go and do something about it themselves. That's really important. I think we need to continue to campaign and lobby for a sustainable rebuild of Christchurch. We need to continue doing that. I mean,
Yeah.
I do that a little bit as a teacher. We do that in our daily lives every day and through our volunteer work for the Green Party. I'm a radio DJ for Volcano Radio in Littleton.
Oh, sweet.
So I do lots of environmental-based interviews with lots of people who are coming up with kind of new initiatives for just local environmental stuff. So I can carry on kind of giving good profile to good projects that are happening locally in and around Port Hils, which is where the electorate that I'm the candidate for.
Okay.
And I think also just generally supporting movements like Spokes, like CAN, like 350.org and like 1010 that we all do anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Well, how can young New Zealanders convince the government to take stronger action on climate change?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, well, firstly, young New Zealanders need to continue to vote with their feet and their bikes until the point when they can actually vote in the election. So vote by the forms of transport that they favour for going to school or whatever, or college. They can do things like talk to their parents. They can challenge their teachers. They can write letters to newspapers. They can make videos like this sort of thing, like you're doing, which I think is great. All those sorts of things where they engage with people around them and just turn the light on in other people's consciousnesses that it's okay to question the current paradigm and to say, look, hang on, we don't agree with what's going on here. It's our future you're messing with. You need to sort it out and change it. One last thing they could do is they could write poetry or Japanese haiku.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you? And I've actually written one. If you'd like to hear it.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, so I just must confess, it's not actually a real Japanese haiku because I think they're quite strict on like having
Having the width of
the 3 lines and the 5, 7, 5. So
yeah, we go ahead.
yeah. Okay. So, leave the coal in the hole, keep the oil in the soil. Reasons abound to leave fossil fuels in the ground. Your kids will love you for it.
Great.
How's that?
Right, good. Sweet, we're done.